Guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about the Girl Scout murders. This happened in 1977, and it's just one of those cases where it pulls you back to your childhood and it makes you say, you know, you send your child off to camp, and especially an overnight camp, and you think nothing is going to happen to them. They're safe, they're sound. Well, this was not the story for these three young girls. And this happened in the Mays County area of Oklahoma. So these young girls were on their way to have fun, you know, have the sisterhood. And it was two of them were excited, one of them were not. And it just makes you say, wow, like, I wonder if, you know, she had some intuition of that something was going to potentially happen to her, because our gut does speak to us whether we realize it or not. So we have 8-year-old Lori Farmer, 9-year-old Michelle Gus, and 10-year-old Dory Denise Millen. And it's truly sad because these young girls was their first time coming to the Girl Scouts, and you're thinking that you're just gonna have this amazing time. And Dory, she actually did not want to come. You know, she was telling her mother that she'd rather stay home. Why do I have to go? She was like not in the mood for it at all whatsoever. But their crime is still unsolved. And as we begin to talk about one of the key suspects in this case, I want you guys to kind of determine what you think happened to these three young girls and who did it. So let's talk about the Girl Scout murders. So on June 13th, 1977, these three girls were on their way to Camp Scout in Mays County of Oklahoma. They were traveling over 50 miles from Tusla, Oklahoma to go to this great camp that they thought they would have a great time at. But that was not the story for them. So these three young girls were brutally beaten, raped, and sodomized. And it just makes you wonder what sick individual would do such a thing to them. And it also makes you realize that even though we believe that there is good in people, that is not always the case. Just 2 months before the camp opened for the campers, the camp counselors were there to have training, and they were actually warned a little bit, or scared, if that makes sense, that something would have happened when camp did open. Camper went into her tent and found a note left to a donut box that was empty. And in the note, it basically says that they are going to kill 4 young girls. And they then begin to have also a sculpture picture like of an individual or man, from what I've read, who was hung by a tree. And so the camper, she tells someone, but they basically blow it off, say, oh, well, you know, it's probably just a practical prank. And it was never further investigated, because, I mean, with me, I'm wondering like, well, who the hell did this? We need to have a conversation. I guess that's the difference between 1977 versus 2020. The night before they were killed, there was a thunderstorm that occurred, and all of the campers were going back to their tents, and these three girls were in tent 8, and they were kind of like at the end of what they call like a horseshoe from the actual other campers and the camp counselors. So kind of on the further end of the campsite. So that night around 1 a.m., a camp counselor actually stated that she heard noises. And so she went to investigate it, but there was nothing that was made of it. But there was also like a feeling in the campgrounds that someone was watching them. And although they never seen anyone, there was like shadow lights, or, you know, never was able to kind of pinpoint if someone was playing games on them. There was just never any, you know, proof. About 30 minutes later from the camp counselor's incident, a camper in tent 7 was awoken by a flashlight. And at this time, she was wondering, like, why is this person flashing this flashlight in my tent? Like, what's going on? And what's scary is the person, like, was trying to go into camp, into tent 7. but then they end up leaving. They went into tent 8. Then another camper heard screams and heard the individual say, "Mama, mama," but they were so scared to like do anything, they didn't say anything at all. The next morning, camper was on their way to the bathroom when they seen the sleeping bags on the trail, and this was about 150 yards from what I read from the actual tent. And they stated, you know, they're looking like, oh, okay, you know, tents on the floor. Why would someone leave their tents on the floor? But as she approached the situation, began to realize that this was actually 3 girls in their sleeping bags, and they were deceased. 2 of the girls had been raped and bludgeoned, brutally beaten pretty much, and one of them was strangled and sodomized. Only thing that was at the crime scene at the time was a flashlight that did have a fingerprint, but it was never able to be identified. And then there was a shoe print of blood in the tent, but that was also unable to be identified as well. And there was DNA that was collected from the girls because of course, you know, they were raped. And authorities were also able to find semen that was in a pillowcase not too far from where the girls' bodies were. So shortly after the girls were killed, the police kind of had their eyes on an individual who they believe could have possibly killed these 3 young girls. They were looking at Jean Leroy. Jean Leroy was actually a convicted rapist who had served and escaped from prison for raping and kidnapping 2 pregnant women. Police believe that he was the suspect because about 10 days after the murders, there were items that were found in a cave, and a lot of the items matched the actual crime scene. Investigators were able to find a roll of tape, and there was a pair of sunglasses that was actually taken from the campgrounds from one of the camp counselors. After this is when police officers did a massive search for him. So about 10 months after the murders, police got a tip and they were able to find Jean Leroy. But Jean stated that he did not kill these young girls because, one, he had a vasectomy, so he couldn't produce any semen. In 1989, FBI did test the DNA that was covered, but they were unable to get a conclusive DNA match because the results were inconclusive. So they weren't able to rule out Jean Leroy. He went to trial, but he was later found not guilty. And the juries basically stated that they didn't want to find him guilty of it because there was not enough evidence to convict him for murdering these 3 girls. And I can only imagine back in 1970s and 1980s when this case erupted, and how, you know, the media had already pinpointed him as the guy because of his prior convictions. But regardless or not, he was going to be in prison anyways because of his crime of kidnapping and raping those 2 women and probably many more. But I guess they felt like they needed more, you know. And I think people have to realize, like, you can't really blame them, but at the same time, it's like it does make it hard when people think that everything has to be based off just DNA evidence. But nonetheless, he was found not guilty, and he ended up dying in 1979 while he was in prison. He was on the courtyard jogging and lifting weights, from what I read, when he had a heart attack. So who knows if that was actually his karma from what he had did and put, you know, those other women through. But I guess it would feel good to know, like, if he did in fact kill these young girls. But many think that by him being in prison, someone must have had, you know, killed him. So in 2008, the DNA was actually retested. And what's startling is when they retested this DNA, there was partial female DNA profile. And many believe because there was a tip that came in that stated that there was actually 4 men and 1 woman who were involved in the murder of these 3 girls. Because back in 1989, I want to read this. Reverend Gerald Manley contacted the authorities to say he thought 4 men were responsible for ending the lives of Farmer Gus and Miller. Manley provided law enforcement with the names of 2 of the people he said killed the girls, and while officials investigated the tip provided by the Reverend, they were unable to link the men to the murders. Manley said he went to Camp Scout with 4 men whom he claimed needed his Christian influence, and he saw the dead body of one of the girls in 2 sleeping bags that appeared to contain the corpse of 2 other Girl Scouts. While police have been unable to corroborate the Reverend's story, Manley reportedly passed a lie detector test when questioned about his claims and provided the same account under hypnosis. But it was also stated too in 2008 that they were trying to retest, the DNA of Jean Leroy, but it was too hard to create a profile of the actual DNA that was left because it was too degraded, because time has just, went by. You're talking years and years and years on years. And law enforcement stated that they felt that a female was involved, I guess due to some of the evidence. And it makes you think too, because think about that night when one of the campers state that, someone came in with the flashlight. Like, what if a female was there to kind of lure the girls out, and then that's when something tragically happened? Because, it just makes you wonder, because there's 3 girls, and then it's like, damn, you raped 2 of them and sodomized 1 of them, and it's just like, it just makes your mind wonder on the outlook of it all. But nonetheless, it's sad. The camp did end up closing down literally right after it happened. Literally, and then 24 hours after the crime had occurred, all the children were returned to their families. So, like, can you imagine? And then y'all, there was a report of, like, families started finding out that 3 kids were murdered, but they didn't know the names of the kids. But newspaper got a hold of it and started doing newspapers about murder at Camp Scout, and it just, or Scott, whatever. But it just makes you wonder, it's just truly sad. So the camp ended up closing down. They shut down and they end up selling it to someone, and that has pretty much been the end of that camp. No other campers have been able to come to that campsite due to the heinous murder of these 3 kids. And the families to this day believe that, Hart was the killer, because of his background and everything that just came in with it. But they have been trying to move on since the killings, creating legacies from their names and just trying to keep their head afloat, because I couldn't imagine losing my child in such a horrendous way. Y'all, when I say I read this case, I was just mind boggled, because it's a lot of layers. And I'm gonna definitely link down the link below, because I want you guys to read this. It came from the Tulsa World, and it was so detailed, y'all. I want you, if you are really curious to read more about it, I'm gonna definitely link it down below so you guys can check it out, because that freaking article broke it down in 6 different parts, and I thought that was so amazing. Let me see if I have her name, who is the writer of it. And they also do have a website for the murders. It's called girlscoutmurders.com. So go check it out if you're really curious and want to, stay up with it and figure. I mean, years and on years has gone by from this case, but maybe you just never know, but it does make you sad, because 1977, it's oh my goodness. But you never know, right? You never know. But yeah, definitely go check out those links if you're curious to follow along with the Girl Scout murders, and then that way you can do your own investigation on it all. So let me know what your theories are. I just feel like, being as though these girls were so young, is so heartbreaking, because they had so much life to give. And then I just think about how Dory Denise did not want to go. So it was like, was her intuition telling her like not to go? And you know, it just so many things. And then I didn't mention this. So like, because the DNA back then, of course, didn't evolve, they were saying that the reason why his DNA was inconclusive was because, I guess with Native Americans, it's like their DNA is a little from back then. I don't know if it's now, but like their DNA could only test like I guess like certain numbers. So that's why, if in fact he was, that's why the test was inconclusive. But I guess it did match to like the Cherokee Indians. So y'all, I don't know, but nonetheless, I feel like if he did it, he got his karma. He died in prison where his butt should have been all along for when he was, you know, did the crime prior. Yeah, so that's pretty much this crime story, guys. I hope you guys tune in for more. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you are new. And don't forget to check out the podcast. We are on Apple and Google. And we are listed as the Milk Carton Series. So guys, and I upload on Mondays for that. So I will see you guys. I'm really excited of this journey and just talking to you guys with more crime cases. So I'll see you guys.